Hello everyone, and welcome to Galaxy 89 Cars. In today's video, my BMW Z4 Coupe is having its first detail in over 10 years. This was confirmed by talking to the previous owner and looking through the car's history, so I think we can expect some pretty significant improvements. This video is episode 3 of my BMW Z4 Coupe improvement series, where you can find episodes 1 and 2 here. Now, of course the car has been cleaned in that time. I mean, 10 years is a very long time. But detailing is a much more protective and restorative process, a significantly more in-depth process that brings up the car to a completely different standard than washing alone. So, to have all this work done, I've come back to visit my friends at TKDetailing, who I've worked with a number of times before, namely to detail the Porsche Boxster I had and also the Abarth. And you can find all of their contact details in the description of the video. Before starting the detail, let's take a walk around the car. We can see there's a thick layer of dirt and dried salt from the winter roads covering the paint that now looks faded and doesn't have that rich dark metallic appearance it originally came with. Due to what looks like quite a bad design, water naturally pours around the rear window sill, and over time, a very noticeable layer of algae has been able to form that I really hope we can remove today. My recently fully refurbished wheels have also lost their bright appearance and joined the rest of the car in being covered in grime. Tom started the detail by giving the wheels and arches a thorough jet wash. He then applied an iron remover that runs red when it begins to remove the harmful contaminant. After giving it some time to dwell, he got a bucket with a pH-neutral wheel wash and used a variety of brushes to scrub both the inside and outside of the alloys. This process was finished by using a sponge to target those more stubborn stains, and when finished, the wheel was jet washed clear. Before repeating these steps on all of the other wheels, Tom sprayed an anti-rust solution onto the brakes and hubs. With the rear left also completed, we can take a quick look at the huge difference already made by comparing to the unwashed right side. Before cleaning the larger panels, Tom started to decontaminate and clean the smaller areas, sills and rubber gaskets. This process was started with the driver's side sill that received a light jet wash first to ensure the interior didn't get too wet. Once sufficiently moistened, a decontaminant was applied and a small brush was used to manipulate the dirt along the sill, hinges and shuts, and once cleaned, these areas were jet washed once again. These processes were then repeated on the passenger side. Once completed, Tom moved to the petrol cap, which was caked in grime as we saw earlier. The same decontaminant was applied and brush used to ensure a deep clean. Tom decided to give the solution time to dwell, as this area was especially dirty, and while we waited, he employed a swab to target the smaller areas and more stubborn dirt. Once satisfied with the clean and dwell time, Tom gave this area a second jet wash to clean it out. And if we compare it to earlier, we can see how much of a difference has been made. We then moved around to the front and opened the bonnet. Because my engine bay is in such a mess, we're going to dedicate another video to a full engine detail. However, Tom decided to clean the area at the bottom of the windscreen, as this often holds drains that can get blocked and stop water from draining properly. As with the other stages, this started with a jet wash, then the application of a decontaminant which was manipulated using a brush, then a final jet wash to clear. With this area of the front decontaminated, it was time to move to the rear. Once again, this started with a light jet wash, which was followed by the application of the decontaminant spray and manipulation using a brush, and as with every other area of my car, these panels were in much need of a clean. After this, Tom could finally start preparing the main body of the car, which began by jet washing the arches more thoroughly and continuing along the underside of the side skirts. The jet wash stage then moved to the panels, windows and rubber gaskets, gradually moving around the car. As the paint of my car wasn't in the best condition, a pH-neutral paint decontaminant was applied and jet washed off, just to loosen any extra grime on the paint. Then, before the always satisfying snow foam stage, the rubber gasket seals were given the same treatment as the other areas, sprayed with the decontaminant and cleaned more thoroughly with the brush. This process was especially satisfying around the rear window, as that's where the biggest difference would be made. This step was carried out around all windows and gasket seals before being jet washed to clear soap and debris. With the majority of areas and paint decontaminated, it was finally time to apply an initial covering of snow foam to the entire car. This stage requires a dwell time to really let the foam penetrate and soften remaining grime, so it can be more easily removed by jet washing and not left to potentially harm the paint. As the snow foam was left to dwell on the panels, Tom grabbed a larger brush and scrubbed the inside of the arches to remove anything left from the previous stages. This was then repeated around the other arches, and looking down at the foam, you can really see how much grime is left despite being jet washed multiple times. With all the arches now thoroughly cleaned, and the foam given a sufficient time to dwell, it was jet washed off, hopefully also removing a lot of dirt in the process. After a quick post-foam inspection, we could still see dirt between some of the panels, so Tom used two different size swabs to really work these areas, which included the algae-covered area at the rear. A second layer of snow foam was then applied to areas that typically hold a lot of grime, such as the gasket seals and badges, to allow Tom to give these areas a deeper clean. Considering how brown this turned the foam, it was clearly still needed, despite the multiple washes they've already had. This final snow foam and decon stage was then cleaned off with a thorough jet wash. It was then time to turn focus to the actual paint, which we can see definitely requires a lot of attention. Using the two-bucket method, a pH-neutral shampoo and lamb's wool mitt, Tom started to cleanse the car from top to bottom. As with every other stage, the car was jet washed once completed. Despite all these stages, the exhaust tips were still holding a lot of carbon and dirt, so Tom decided to use the decon stage we've seen before to give them a more direct clean before being jet washed clear. After multiple jet washes, decontamination, snow foams and even a shampoo stage, the paint still had ingrained contaminants, which could actually be heard when Tom was using the lamb's wool mitt, the rough sound as he moved the mitt across the paint. So, to target this deeper layer of contamination, Tom sprayed the car again and used a lubricant before employing valeting clay to safely remove particles from the lacquer. This reflects the level of deeper contamination, as it should sound smooth. After a few minutes of the clay bar, we can see how much smoother the paint is by how easily the water runs off it, in comparison to the non-clayed side. This clay stage was repeated on all paint surfaces on the car, and strangely, the sides, which are typically worse, were better here. Tom had to use this clay stage twice, as he kept picking up dirt from the rough panels, but finally, we reached a point where he was happy to do a final jet wash, before hand drying the car with a microfiber towel. After completing the hand dry, we can take a moment to appreciate how much better the paint already looks. For the first time since I've had the car, the paint looks bright and we can actually see the metallic flakes. Now that the decontamination and wash stages are complete, it was time to move the car inside to start the next stage, a light spot correction, light machine polish and finishing touches. However, before we can start, the car needed to be as dry as possible, so Tom used an air jet to blow reluctant water out of panel gap. When this was completed, the car was moved into the detailing bay at the rear of the studio. Being a near 13-year-old car, it does have a few scratches and scrapes on the paintwork, so the first job here was to correct these issues. On the left side of the rear bumper, there are a few of these on the sweeping line and to the left of the number plate. Using a cutting solution and machine polish with a more precise pad, Tom spent time working on these areas to improve their finish, which I think was very successful. Moving to the right side of the rear bumper, we find yet another scuff, so the same process was repeated here, once again achieving a really good result. After these spots had been corrected, it was time to move to a more general light machine polish of the remaining panels, moving clockwise around the car. This stage involved using a different solution with the machine, now fitted with a larger pad, and aimed to partially correct the paint, as we plan to do a full correction in the future. After each panel was machine polished, Tom used one cloth to buff any remaining product, then a nano protection spray with a second cloth to add a layer of shine and protection. When Tom moved around to the front of the car, he gave each of the headlights a quick machine polish to clean and brighten the glass that can often become faded. With half of the front bumper complete, we can see how the scratches and swirl marks have been reduced with just a light machine polish, leaving the paint looking more clear and dark. We then turned our attention to the roof, which was the next area that required spot correction. Firstly, Tom taped off the rubber windscreen seal before using a similar setup to the previous spot corrections. Although still not a complete paint correction, this area actually received the most attention of any panel, which can be seen by the reduction of imperfections. Once Tom had finished the roof, he continued the light machine polish on the right side of the car, following the same steps as we've already seen. The largest panel, the bonnet, was left to last to allow it to cool, and because it required the most work. After an inspection, we found an area of scratches that required spot correction, which I think produced a very impressive result. After that had been completed, it was time to give the rest of the bonnet a light machine polish, and to blend the spot correction so it didn't stand out, as the area had to be worked harder. If we listen carefully, we can hear the difference between Tom buffing the paint now and how it was earlier. It's a lot smoother. With the paint spots corrected, light machine polish, and with a light layer of protection, it was time to move to the finishing touches. The exhaust was still quite stained, so Tom used a metal cleaner with light wire wool to give it a slightly deeper clean, and then buff with a clean microfiber to provide some level of shine. The final steps after this were to clean all of the windows inside and out, give the wheels a final clean, and to dress the tyres. Okay, so Tom from TKDetailing has just finished today's work after about 6 hours of, pretty hard work. As I mentioned in the beginning part of this video, this is just part one of the detail, bringing it up from the sort of base standard it was, where the lacquer was fully contaminated, which we could see from the clay bar even after 3 or 4 different washes. We've brought it up to this standard. So we've done a sort of light machine polish, a bit stronger on the bonnet, which we can see is a really nice condition now. At the front there are still some swirls, but that's to be expected, not from any sort of lacking of work, but more because the paint quality was actually quite poor. It had just never ever been worked on. The top got the highest level, and that's why it now looks the best. Glass has been done, gone through the wheels, so they're nice and glossy now, and also dressed the tyres, so they look great. The biggest issues for me were sort of along the sides here, inside here, which now looks almost brand new, I'd say, the first time we can see the sticker in absolutely ages. And of course this bit around here, which actually isn't such a great design because water naturally pools in this area and there doesn't seem to be a natural drain for it, so it collects and algae grows. So what we saw earlier, and now it looks like this, which is absolutely fantastic. So I just want to say a massive thank you to Tom at TKDetailing for all the hard work he's put into making the car look this way. This is going to be a series of videos, so we're also going to work on the calipers because they're quite rusted up and they need work. We also need to do the sort of full paint correction instead of just the light machine polish, which the majority of the panels of the car have had, even though it looks really good. And we need to do an engine bay detail and an interior detail, so there's a lot of things to do. But nevertheless, I want to say thank you for a third time. If you'd like to have your car worked on, if you're in the area, please find all their contact details below. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe for more.